new Backroads, then Four Corners. Later, Media Watch and China Tonight. Log in to ABC iView and add shows to your watch list.
Tonight, more revelations about John Baralaro and that New York trade job as the former New South Wales Deputy Premier gives evidence for the first time. Also tonight, good news for Canberra women seeking treatment for some gynecological cancers as the ACT government funds a permanent local unit. Fresh hopes a ceasefire will hold after a weekend of bloodshed in Gaza. And Canberra's Kelsey Lee Barber saves the best for last, winning Commonwealth gold with her final throw. Good evening, Dan Bourchier with ABC News. John Baralaro described it as a personal hell, one in which he was the victim. For the first time, the former New South Wales Deputy Premier has given evidence into his appointment to an overseas trade role and the controversy that followed. The inquiry looked at the involvement of some of his former parliamentary colleagues and what the Premier knew about the process.
His appearance was highly anticipated and calls for apprehension among his former colleagues.
Thank you for the opportunity to attend today's inquiry.
Not long into John Baralaro's evidence, he relayed a conversation he had with the Premier.
I just mentioned that, I was thinking about the trade role to the Americas.
And what did he say?
I think it was just like, great, and that was it.
The former Deputy Premier told the inquiry that occurred in November last year when he'd left Cabinet but was still a sitting MP.
There was many phone calls after I left with Mr Perrottet. He was always checking in on me. He was checking in on me, and on one of those occasions I flagged, as I said, that I'd be interested. He had nothing more to say than go for it.
Mr Baralaro insists he then informed Mr Perrottet he'd applied in an unplanned meeting.
I ran into Premier Perrottet in Martin Place late January, early February.
The Premier's been under pressure over his political judgment around this appointment. Allegations have also emerged that he considered creating a parliamentary trade secretary role for David Elliott and discussed an overseas posting when deciding his cabinet.
The allegations in relation to the creation of a role that I would give to somebody outside politics is completely false and offensive.
But Mr Perrottet didn't deny conversations had taken place with the now Transport Minister.
I'm not going into private conversations. They're natural conversations that a Premier or a Prime Minister has with their team.
This threatens to further damage the Premier, who is battling declining public confidence in the integrity of trade appointments. And now the man most likely to be his deputy, Matt Keane, has been pulled into the John Baralaro controversy. It's been revealed the former Deputy Premier sent him a text message about the job.
Mr Baralaro texted me. He indicated that he wanted to apply for this job. I encouraged him to do so, as he obviously did. I didn't really give it a second thought.
The Treasurer is the only declared candidate to replace Stuart Ayres as deputy, who resigned over the trade controversy. David Elliott has withdrawn, he says, after a conversation with the Premier. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
Months of uncertainty has ended with the ACT government committing to a permanent local unit for treating certain gynecological cancers. Work is underway to recruit a surgical team and establish the best model of care. The daughter of one Canberra woman who died from ovarian cancer says it's better late than never.
When Jane Harris remembers her late mum Erica's 7-year battle with ovarian cancer, it's clear the forced travel to Sydney for surgery took a big toll.
As well as having her initial extensive surgery, she then had to have follow-up surgery to remove her spleen, to remove parts of her bowel.
Jane established a support group following Erica's diagnosis and says many women in the Canberra region have since shared similar stories, all frustrated about the lack of a permanent public surgery service for gynecological cancers in the ACT. That absence means the only treatment available is a fortnightly fly-in, fly-out service through Sydney's Royal Hospital for Women.
And they'd have to return home within about 10 days of having massive abdominal surgery.
That service has faced an uncertain future for months since the surgeon announced he'd be retiring at the end of the year. But just in time, Canberra Health Services is working to establish a permanent local unit, and the search is on for a specialist surgeon and support staff.
Canberra Health Services has just been working through what the model of care will look like, what supports are required to ensure that that can occur.
A Sydney-based Canberran with the right credentials, Dr Leon Foster, has already put his hand up. But the ministers insisted there must be a merit-based recruitment process.
But we really obviously are very encouraged by the enthusiasm that people have shown for this service, both consumers and the specialists who have advocated for its delivery.
It will make life not easier, but a little bit less stressful.
The government says in the meantime it will continue to support the Royal Women's Hospital FIFO service. Emmy Groves, ABC News, Canberra.
It's a job seekers market with vacancies at near record highs, but it's not translating into higher wages. And with soaring inflation, more people feel as if they're going backwards. Here's business reporter Daniel Ziffer.
This homegrown company builds complex robotic tools, and management says that requires paying humans bigger wages.
So if you're not coming to the front with the best technology, then you're not going to win. So you've got to look after people properly.
The company has lifted the wages of all staff to deal with inflation and to fill over 100 open positions.
And the only way to succeed is if you have better people.
But most employers aren't doing that. Unemployment is at record lows and there's a smaller supply of available workers. But wage growth has barely moved. With the soaring inflation in the cost of food, fuel and interest rates, people are going backwards.
Because for 10 years we've been told that some magic wage growth fairy will come along and one day boost wages. The only way that wages can grow in Australia is if employers pay their workers higher wages.
Many businesses say soaring costs mean they can't lift wages. Some companies are offering perks and flexibility instead of more money. And the evidence is that the best way to get a pay rise is to get a new job.
The wage change for those who've moved employers is significantly higher than those who haven't.
But for Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz, the wages question has a simple answer.
They need to be higher. Wages have not been keeping up with inflation, which means a real wage cut.
The government is holding its job summit next month. So you're going to hear ideas about changes to wage bargaining and boosting workers' power. They'll be unpopular with some segments of business, but likely cheered by workers who've seen living standards decline. Daniel Ziffer, ABC News.
China is planning to stage military exercises in the Yellow Sea near South Korea until the middle of the month. The expansion follows a fourth day of live fire drills around Taiwan. China began simulating the large-scale attacks immediately after US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taipei, infuriating Beijing. The Foreign Minister Penny Wong says Australia continues to urge restraint.
What is most critical at the moment is that the temperature is lowered and calm is restored when it comes to cross-strait tensions.
Taiwan has accused China of practicing for an invasion of the island. After 3 days of violence, a ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian militants appears to be holding. More than 40 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. In Israel, thousands have had to shelter in bunkers. Here's Middle East correspondent Alison Horn.
Hours before the ceasefire, beachgoers in Tel Aviv run for shelter as another barrage of rockets is fired from Gaza. Israel hit back with more airstrikes in one final assault before the skies went quiet. The 3-day war has taken a heavy toll. Gazan officials say more than 40 Palestinians have been killed, 15 of them children, though Israel claims that some of the casualties were caused by misfired Gazan rockets.
I was saying a last prayers. I didn't expect to live until the moment they rescued me.
Perth resident Eamon Quader and his 2 children have been visiting family in Gaza and got trapped in the chaos.
It's terrifying, to be honest. It's really terrifying because, you know, all you hear is just explosions and you feel you would be the next victim. There's just panic.
The Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad lost both their top military commanders in Israeli airstrikes. In retaliation, militants fired about 1,000 rockets into Israel. Most were intercepted by the country's missile defence system. No Israelis were killed. Now a ceasefire has been agreed. Both sides are claiming victory. Israel says it's met its objectives. Islamic Jihad says it hasn't been broken. There's a glimmer of hope for peace.
I really hope it will last long and we will be able to live a bit quietly.
Longer-term peace still seems unlikely. Alison Horn, ABC News, Jerusalem.
The widow of an Australian Air Force veteran who took his own life has spoken out about her husband's mental deterioration and her fight for compensation. Speaking at the Royal Commission into Defence and Veterans Suicide in Hobart, the woman said Australia still has a lot to learn about the treatment of trauma and mental illness.
Widow Madonna Paul remembers what her husband Michael was like before he joined the army.
He just loved life. He was good. He was happy.
Michael worked as an aircraft fitter, and there was one aircraft he believed was too dangerous to be in the air, the Nomad.
Was he concerned that the aircraft would kill people?
Absolutely. And it did. And its actual nickname was the Widowmaker.
In 1991, 4 people died in a Nomad crash. Michael was never the same again. He struggled with depression and PTSD, began drinking heavily and became aggressive towards his wife. Eventually, he took his own life.
He was really struggling. You could see that. He was struggling. It's not what he wanted. He didn't know how to cope with what was going on.
The National Mental Health Commissioner also gave evidence today. He spoke about how treatment should be guided by those with lived experience, who've tried to take their own lives, or people like Madonna Paul, who've lost loved ones to it.
The quest for suicide prevention will be so much more effective if we listen and respond to the people we're seeking to serve and support.
Madonna's fight didn't end when Michael died. She's had to battle for compensation.
Coming through that trauma, you need people who have lived it so you can actually see that they are surviving and they're doing okay.
She says Australia has a lot to learn when it comes to supporting those who are left behind. Lucy MacDonald, ABC News.
And if you are a serving or former member of the Defence Forces or a relative in need of support, you can call the Defence Family Helpline or Open Arms using the numbers on your screen. And of course, help is also available from Lifeline on 13 11 14. Bin Night in Canberra will see big changes in the future when new recycling plants go live. The ACT government has unveiled plans to build 2 new plants, including a large-scale composting facility.
It's literally garbage, but Mugger Lane Tip is about to get a multi-million-dollar upgrade.
Most Australians are very keen to recycle, but we need to make it as easy as possible for families to do that.
The ACT and federal governments are joining forces for a new $23 million facility that recycles items from yellow bins, while the Commonwealth will pour in an additional $13 million for a composting facility that will process 50,000 tonnes of organic material a year.
food scraps, when they go into landfill, break down to create a thing called methane, and that has a really quite a negative impact environmentally.
If we can divert this organic material through the FOGO scheme and this new plant that we're building, we can cut waste emissions by 30%.
The government won't say when the Mugger Lane projects will be delivered, but they will go out to tender later this year.
We expect the design and construction to take around 18 months.
Last November, a trial began across 4 Belconnen suburbs, with homes given a kitchen caddy to put their food scraps in. The idea is to ensure the scraps end up in the green waste bin rather than going to landfill. Surveys have shown there's widespread support for the change.
In order to expand that out to every Canberra household, we need to build a large-scale composting facility.
The plan is for the compost plant to take residential and commercial food waste, which will require action from the hospitality sector.
The question for the ACT government is what incentives or regulatory system will be in place so that all those food businesses actually are incentivised.
That's still likely to be a few years away. For now, the focus is on building facilities that ensure the effort Canberrans put into recycling doesn't go to waste. Peter Lusted, ABC News, Canberra.
Later this hour, the innovative fertility treatment giving women hope.
We had no idea about these options. It was amazing that it was offered to us and that we could take it up.
That probably was our one opportunity to think about it, and we almost missed it.
Plus, one of the United States' most senior diplomats talks about the fallout from Nancy Pelosi's Taiwan visit. That's coming up.
A Queensland man charged with murdering a teenager in Mount Isa has had his case mentioned briefly in court. It's alleged 52-year-old Trevor Colton drove his car into a crowd of people during a disturbance early Saturday morning, hitting and killing a 13-year-old girl. Police are concerned about possible retribution.
There is no need for vigilantism, and it is a bad idea. It's tragic enough that one person's life has been taken and that another 52-year-old man is in jail awaiting his trial for this.
Mr. Colton was remanded in custody. The matter will return to court next month. The US Senate has approved a sweeping $620 billion climate tax and healthcare package. The Inflation Reduction Act passed after a marathon session with Vice President Kamala Harris casting the deciding vote. The bill authorises the largest spend on climate action in US history, with investment in renewables and incentives to boost the take-up of electric vehicles as well as solar energy.
The Senate has now passed the most significant bill to fight the climate crisis ever, and it's going to make a difference to my grandkids.
The bill also caps prescription drug costs and increases taxes on large corporations. It's a significant victory for President Joe Biden ahead of the November midterm elections. Crown Casino has opened the first of its VIP gaming rooms in Sydney tonight, less than 2 years after it was deemed unfit to hold a gaming licence. The independent regulator granted Crown a conditional gaming licence in June. It says the Sydney venue will be closely watched to make sure there's no money laundering going on.
Crown Sydney says the symbolism of today's date, the 8th of the 8th, represents an ideal time to open its VIP casino doors. Considered the luckiest number in Chinese culture linked to wealth, there's no secret about who the target market is.
China's always been a very big market for Australia, and hopefully we're going to see the return of that market, but probably not until later this year or next year.
For now, though, community advocates say they're deeply concerned about the local impact of a new casino, with minimum bets starting at $20 and membership free.
That includes the families, the communities, the relatives, even the generations to come, because people have lost their livelihoods, people have lost homes to gambling.
An alliance of 6 groups are pushing for tougher reforms ahead of the state government introducing legislation this week to curb money laundering. It follows independent inquiries in New South Wales, Victoria and Western Australia, which found Crown unfit to hold casino licences.
What we want to see is tough regulations in place to protect those that are most vulnerable.
The regulator warns Crown Sydney will be closely watched.
They don't say to us suddenly, culture's fixed, happy days. We want to see that happening. We want them to perform and do as they told us they're going to do.
If Crown Sydney adheres to the requirements of the conditional casino licence, experts believe the gaming floors could deliver an extra $100 million in tax revenue for the state government in its first year.
One of the levels of addiction to gambling in our state is the addiction of the state government to the tax revenues that come from it.
Crown Sydney says it's worked with the regulator to develop a safe and responsible gaming environment. Rani Hayman, ABC News, Sydney.
To finance now, and BHP has launched an $8.4 billion takeover offer for South Australian copper miner Oz Minerals. Here's Alan Kohler.
In 2009, a company owned by the Chinese government tried to buy Oz Minerals for $1.7 billion. But the Australian government blocked the deal because its main copper mine, called Prominent Hill, is actually within the Woomera rocket range in South Australia. Eventually, the Chinese were allowed to buy all of Oz Minerals except for Prominent Hill. And now BHP wants to buy that, plus a couple of other mines and deposits that Oz Minerals owns, for $8.4 billion. But it's been knocked back by the board. You'll need to cough up more than that, they said. And fair enough. Here's a chart of Oz Minerals' share price this year, and BHP's price is what the stock was selling for 4 months ago. So, unsurprising that punters are betting that BHP will have to end up paying more than $25. The offer for Oz Minerals lit a small fire under the mining sector, with stocks like South32 going for a bit of a trot, along with the iron ore and energy companies. The All Ordinaries was held back by retailers falling. Here's why the iron ore miners went up. The price of their product jumped 6% over the weekend. And the US market fell a bit on Friday after June employment data was much stronger than expected, suggesting that the Federal Reserve might have to be more aggressive putting up interest rates. And the recovery in American employment has been incredible. The lines represent all the post-war recessions in the United States. And the blue one is the GFC, when it took 6 years to get jobs back to where they were. This time, it's taken 2 years, even though the job losses were more than twice as bad. And finally, the Australian dollar stayed under 70 US cents. And that's finance.
Canberra Raiders CEO Don Furner says the club will accept any sanctions handed to coach Ricky Stewart over his offensive comments towards Penrith player Jamin Salmon. In a statement released today, the club says it does not condone Stewart's behaviour and is cooperating with the NRL's official inquiry. Stewart has apologised for the comments made at a press conference after a Saturday night's game at Canberra Stadium. The club says it will continue to provide personal and professional support to the coach as he awaits the NRL's final verdict. In tennis, Canberra's Nick Kyrgios has claimed his 11th ATP singles title. The Wimbledon runner-up took just 81 minutes to beat Japan's Yoshihito Nishioka 6-4, 6-3 in the final of the Washington Open. It's the 27-year-old's first singles title since winning the same tournament in 2019.
Kyrgios will wear the crown once again.
It's just very emotional for me to see where I was at last year to now. It's just an incredible transformation.
Kyrgios has now won 11 of his past 12 matches and is on track to secure a seeding for the US Open later this month. In Birmingham, the Diamonds have beaten Jamaica in the netball final to give Australia its 1,000th gold medal in the Commonwealth Games. There were 7 gold medals for Australia on the penultimate day of competition, including 1 for Canberra's Kelsey Lee Barber. From Birmingham, here's national sport reporter David Mark.
The Australian Diamonds lost just 1 game in the netball competition to Jamaica in the pool matches, but they were too strong this time, winning 55 to 51.
It is gold for the Diamonds. The girls and I are absolutely stoked. It means so much to us.
It's the Diamonds' 4th Commonwealth Games gold. The inaugural women's cricket final between Australia and India was a thriller. Chasing 162 for victory, India lost late wickets and was all out for 152.
Australia have struck gold!
Talia McGrath was allowed to play after testing positive to COVID on the morning of the game, and told to keep her distance, but that directive was ignored in the exuberance of the win.
There's probably 75% of people in this room have COVID, so just because one's been publicly named doesn't mean that she poses any more threat than the people we're talking to right now.
World Javelin champion Kelsey Lee Barber recovered from a bout of COVID to win the gold with the last throw of the competition, ahead of teammate Mackenzie Little.
I really enjoy the competition, so she kept me working for it, and I love that. I love being asked to produce something and find something else.
Peter Boll fought all the way to the line in the 800 metres final, but defending champion Kenya's Wycliffe Kinyamal was too strong in the end.
Closing, Kimanyal in front, Boll won't quite do it.
Cassiel Rousseau produced the highest scoring dive of the Games to win the 10-metre platform.
That's it! He's absolutely smashed that!
In my head I was like, oh, I'll just I won't care if I, do well, do anything. And I just smoked it.
Madison Keeney took out the 3-metre springboard for her second gold of the Games. The Australian women's road cycling team organised themselves superbly for Georgia Baker to sprint to victory and earn her third gold for the Games.
She rode a perfect race and so did her team.
And there was success on the sand, with Chris McHugh and Paul Burnett winning the gold medal match against Canada. David Mark, ABC News, Birmingham.
And David Mark joins me now. David, what's coming up on the final day of competition?
Yeah, Dan, there's still gold medals to be decided. The Kookaburras, the men's hockey team, are playing off for the gold medal today against India. They're going for their 7th consecutive gold medal at the Commonwealth Games. We've also got Australian teams in diving, squash and table tennis. There's still quite a lot going on. And then tonight we wrap things up with the closing ceremony, which will close out what has been a really successful Commonwealth Games.
David, this has been a truly golden Games for Australia. What have been the biggest highlights?
There's been so many. Australia's done so well in so many sports, but I think you can't go past Ollie Hoare winning the 1500 metres the other night. I mean, he beat a world-class field. It contained 2 former world champions, the Olympic silver and bronze medalists, as well as the 4th place getter. So for him to come out, run a personal best by under 2 seconds and just smash that field was really incredible. I was really taken with Sam Fricker, the young 20-year-old diver who won a bronze medal with Shizin Lee in the 3-metre synchronised competition. He was just so overjoyed to win that bronze medal, and when we were interviewing him he couldn't stop looking at it the whole time and thanked us for being there, which let me tell you is very rare for sporting interviews, so that was amazing. And I think just the Games itself, I've heard people say that there's been 2 million visitors to Birmingham. The crowds have been packed for every single event. The mood in the city has been fantastic, and so many people have talked about how great the Games have been in revitalising the city. So I think, in many ways Birmingham has been the winner.
Great job to David Mark reporting from Birmingham. On this day 80 years ago, parts of the 39th Battalion advanced to the village of Kokoda in what's considered to be one of Australia's most significant battles. Today, the anniversary of that Kokoda campaign was commemorated on the Gold Coast. Governor-General David Hurley spoke of the importance in Australia's military history.
That battalion stood between Australia and the Japanese during the Second World War. Battalion started with 500 people, and at the end there were only 32.
101-year-old George Turner is one of the few surviving veterans of the 39th Battalion. He attended today's ceremony with his son, his grandson and his great-grandsons, all of whom are members of the ADF. To weather, and tonight we have this moody view of Lake Burley Griffin in the Carillion with cumulus clouds feeding off the daytime heating process. Many thanks to Gary Gordon for sharing that view with us tonight. There was a low of -2 overnight before a top of 14. Some light hail and isolated showers in parts of the northern and western suburbs today. Isolated showers in parts of the region, cloudy and windy elsewhere. Almost 11 millimetres of rain fell in Perth today, isolated showers in Sydney, clear in Melbourne and Brisbane, mostly sunny in Adelaide. A weakening cold front has moved to the south coast of South Australia, while another front is approaching the southwest of Western Australia. A trough sweeping across the east today is bringing a cool southerly airstream along the coast, while a high pressure system south of Tasmania extends a ridge across the inland parts of the state. Showers are forecast in Sydney and Perth tomorrow, mostly sunny in Melbourne, sunny in Hobart. Areas of morning frost and fog inland, otherwise fine and mostly sunny. A few showers are forecast near the coast. Daytime temperatures are set to be below average. Areas of frost and the chance of fog in the morning, along with a low of -3, then a mostly sunny day is on the cards. Sunrise at 13 to 7 and will set after 5:30. Ahead, -3 is forecast to start Wednesday before a top of 14. There's a chance of up to a millimetre of rain on Thursday, 6 to 15 millimetres forecast on Friday, with 5 to 10 millimetres possible on Saturday. And that's the latest from the Canberra newsroom. I'm Dan Bourchier. It's great to be with you. Do stay with us now for 7:30. Yarra, good night.
Welcome to the program. Later in the show, I'll be interviewing the US Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman, as China continues its aggressive military exercises, which the government